The first light of dawn stretched across the grasslands in long muted streaks, brushing the tips of acacia trees and the dew-laden tall grass. In the silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, a figure appeared at the far edge of the reserve. It was a lion, her tawny coat blending almost seamlessly with the earth, moving with a deliberate caution that suggested both weariness and purpose. Clutched gently between her jaws was a small, fragile shape, a cub barely old enough to walk, its tiny legs dangling and trembling. The sight struck the ranger with an immediate stillness. He froze instinctively, unsure whether stepping forward would protect or disrupt, whether movement would frighten the mother or invite her curiosity. The lion's eyes flicked toward him briefly, alert but not aggressive, scanning the quiet landscape as if weighing the unfamiliar presence. The cub shifted, its small whimpers carried faintly on the cool morning air, and the mother adjusted her hold, careful not to jostle it. Her steps were slow, calculated, each paw pressing lightly into the soft earth, leaving delicate impressions in the damp soil. The ranger's breath was shallow, his heartbeat quickening as he observed the fragile ballet of survival unfolding before him. He had seen many animals in his years in the field, but something about this scene, the intimacy of instinct, the vulnerability of youth, tugged at a deeper understanding, the quiet acknowledgement that some bonds could not be rushed or forced. The cub's tiny head lolled slightly, its small ears flicking at distant birdsong, its soft mewling a subtle echo in the vast morning stillness. The mother lowered her muzzle briefly to nuzzle the cub against her chest, a gesture both protective and tender, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The sun had just begun to gild the edges of the tall grasses, catching in the mother's coat, turning each hair into strands of liquid gold. She stopped a few meters from a low ridge, shifting her weight as though deciding the safest place to rest. The ranger's hand hovered near his radio, an impulse to call for advice or intervention, but he let it fall. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "It's okay, girl." His voice carried no command, no expectation, merely an acknowledgement of presence, of witness. The lion's ears twitched, eyes meeting his for a heartbeat longer, and then she turned back to the cub, her attention unwavering, deliberate. The fragile trust between observer and observed felt palpable, a quiet accord born in the hush of early morning, as if the world itself had receded to leave space for this small, tender moment. As the sun rose higher, the first heat of the day warming the earth, the mother settled the cub gently into the grass, her body curling around it protectively. The cub's trembling slowed, tiny paws kneading the soil as it sought warmth, eyes half closed in a nascent sense of safety. In that still, golden light, the ranger remained rooted, aware that he had witnessed something rare, a silent arrival, a whispered connection, a fragile beginning at dawn. The morning had settled into a gentle warmth, sunlight spilling across the grass in muted waves that shimmered on the dew. The cub lay small and trembling in the soft grass, its tiny body rising and falling with uncertain breaths. Its mother had stepped back a few paces, eyes fixed on the cub while remaining alert, her tail flicking lightly as if measuring the distance between instinct and patience. She did not call or approach, merely observed, every subtle movement deliberate, a guardian's quiet vigilance. The ranger approached slowly, each step measured and careful, his hands empty, his presence soft, non-threatening. He crouched at the edge of the clearing, just far enough to allow the lion to remain comfortable, yet close enough to reach the cub if needed. The cub stirred, a feeble whimper escaping its lips as it raised its small head. Its coat was matted with dew, and its eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and fragile curiosity. The ranger produced a small container of warm milk, placing it a short distance from the cub, then stepped back. He spoke only once, softly, almost a whisper, "You're almost there." The cub's nose twitched, its tiny paws shuffling toward the offering, and with hesitant licks, it began to drink. The lion's gaze never left the scene, her eyes following every motion of both cub and human, unblinking, assessing. There was no rush, no confrontation, only the patient measurement of each other's intent. Time stretched quietly, broken only by the cub's faint suckling sounds and the distant call of a lone bird. The ranger shifted slightly, settling lower into the grass, careful not to intrude. The lion moved a few steps closer, then paused, watching the cub drink with an intensity that seemed almost reverent. Her body was relaxed yet poised, a steady and controlled energy, muscles rolling under tawny fur, every glance protective. The cub, sensing the absence of threat, continued, small body trembling less with each swallow, a tentative courage forming in its chest. As the morning passed, a rhythm developed. Moments of observation, gentle feeding, silent acknowledgement. The lion occasionally approached, then receded, never forcing contact but never straying far. The ranger adjusted the milk, replaced the container, and murmured quiet encouragement, his movements slow and deliberate, mindful of the trust being cultivated. The cub's movements grew steadier, tiny ears flicking in response to the ambient sounds, eyes tracking both guardian and human. The subtle harmony between them unfolded like a fragile choreography, delicate yet profound, a mutual understanding that action was measured, respect was constant, and patience held the space between them. By midday, the bond had begun to settle into something almost tangible, unspoken but undeniable. The cub nestled slightly closer to the lion, who in turn shifted her weight protectively, eyes half closed in calm vigilance. The ranger remained nearby, observing without interference, his presence a quiet testament to the fragile trust forming. In the hush of the sunlit clearing, with soft rustlings of grass and the gentle warmth of light upon them, the three existed in a delicate equilibrium. Observation and care, instinct and human patience, combined to create a shared understanding. The fragile rhythm of trust had begun, whispered in every careful movement, every tender gesture, every silent acknowledgement of presence. The sun had climbed higher, its warmth mellowing the morning chill, but the cub's small body remained fragile and uneven in its movements. It lay low in the grass, tiny limbs splayed, eyes half closed, breaths shallow and irregular. The ranger knelt nearby, careful to keep his presence non-intrusive, yet every twitch of the cub's ears or flicker of its eyelids drew his attention. Its mother watched from a short distance, muscles coiled beneath tawny fur, tail flicking in subtle agitation. The lion's eyes were vigilant, unblinking, every motion a balance between instinctive protection and the uncertainty of this unusual situation. The fragile trust forged in the morning now faced a harsher test, one defined by weakness and vulnerability. A faint cough escaped the cub, barely audible over the soft whisper of wind through the grass. The ranger's hand hovered over his satchel, hesitant, knowing that intervention must be deliberate and measured. He produced a small cloth to gently lift the cub's head, offering warmth and support, his voice a soft murmur, "Hold on, little one." The cub's eyes fluttered open briefly, reflecting a mixture of confusion and instinctive dependency, then closed again. Its mother shifted slightly, stepping closer without aggression, nudging the cub with her muzzle to encourage breathing, her gaze steady, calm, but full of that quiet intensity that spoke of the ever-present balance between care and survival. The ranger studied the cub's subtle movements, noting every shallow breath, every tremor, every hesitant twitch of tiny paws. Its weakness was pronounced, a reminder that the path ahead would not be simple, that nature's laws demanded both patience and vigilance. The lion circled slowly, eyes tracking the ranger's movements with measured caution, head low, muscles rolling beneath the tawny coat, ears swiveling at the faintest sound. She was teaching, guiding, observing, a delicate negotiation between instinct and the unusual human presence that offered help without encroaching. The cub's frail attempts at standing were met with gentle encouragement from both mother and human. Each wobble, each faltering step, sent ripples of concern through the ranger, and the lion responded with a soft nuzzle or a subtle repositioning, reminding the cub of its safety without forcing action. The air was heavy with quiet intensity, a tension unspoken but deeply felt, as if every creature present understood the stakes. Subtle signs, the cub's labored breathing, the faint droop of its ears, a hesitant step backward, hinted that survival would not be simple, that weakness could invite danger, and that resilience would have to be earned, slowly, one careful gesture at a time. The day wore on with a delicate rhythm of observation and intervention, the cub's small body intermittently stirring, feeding, or resting. The lion never left, shadowing movements, tail brushing the grass, eyes tracking every breath. The ranger remained patient, offering support where needed, stepping back to allow instinct to guide the mother, mindful that trust could fracture with a single misstep. In the swaying golden light of the late morning, the fragile bond between human, mother, and cub endured, tested but persistent. The quiet of the reserve seemed to hold its breath alongside them, acknowledging the tenuousness of life, the uncertainty of survival, and the silent courage it would take to endure. The afternoon sun had begun to soften, casting long golden shadows across the swaying grass, when a subtle change rippled through the small clearing. The cub, which had spent much of the day weak and hesitant, stirred with a newfound energy that seemed almost imperceptible at first. Its tiny paws pressed more firmly into the earth, and the shallow rise and fall of its chest grew steadier. The ranger, crouched nearby, noticed the shift instantly, a quiet hope rising with each careful observation. He allowed himself to exhale, though his movements remained slow and deliberate, conscious of the fragile balance of trust that had formed over the past hours. The lioness, who had been watching with constant vigilance, stepped closer, her gaze softening ever so slightly as the cub's strength returned in small, tentative increments. She nudged the cub gently with her muzzle, encouraging it to attempt a wobbly stand, and for the first time that day the cub rose on unsteady legs. The ranger whispered, "That's it, little one," his voice low and calming, blending with the rustling of the grasses and the distant hum of the morning insects. The cub's tail twitched with cautious excitement, ears flicking at each sound, eyes wide as it took its first tentative steps toward its mother. Each movement was measured, small, but imbued with a sense of triumph that transcended words. The lioness shifted to create space, lowering herself slightly so the cub could press against her for reassurance, a subtle nudge that reinforced both safety and connection. The ranger remained still, observing the delicate choreography of instinct and patience. He reached slowly with an open palm, close enough to offer comfort if needed, yet careful to let the mother maintain her authority, the natural rhythm of guidance unbroken. The cub's wobbling steps grew steadier, each one a silent testament to resilience and the protective guidance surrounding it. Its tiny body, once frail and vulnerable, now carried a hint of determination, a fragile spark that reflected both survival instinct and the quiet care it had received. The lioness followed closely, her tail brushing against the grass, muscles rippling with fluid precision, eyes attentive, ears swiveling at each movement. She guided without pressing, encouraged without force, her presence both anchor and assurance. As the ranger observed, a profound sense of connection settled over the clearing. The three existed in a shared rhythm: observation, careful guidance, and silent acknowledgement. The cub paused briefly to lean against its mother, small head pressed to tawny fur, then looked toward the human with a faint, tentative curiosity. In that suspended moment, the fragile bond between them crystallized, an unspoken understanding that care, patience, and instinct had converged to create something both delicate and powerful. The light shifted as the sun dipped lower, bathing the clearing in warm amber tones. The cub took a few more unsteady steps, tail flicking, eyes bright, while the mother moved protectively nearby. The ranger remained crouched, witnessing the quiet triumph that nature had offered, a fragile, luminous moment that spoke of endurance, trust, and the subtle miracles that emerge when patience meets instinct. The day held its breath, and in that stillness the bond between human, mother, and cub was complete, small yet profound, a testament to survival's quiet grace. The morning light unfolded softly across the reserve, painting the grasslands in pale gold and muted green. The cub, now noticeably stronger, moved with a tentative confidence, each step steadier than the last, paws pressing into the earth with growing assurance. Its small frame no longer trembled as it followed its mother, whose gaze remained watchful yet calm, tail flicking in measured rhythm as she led the way through familiar trails and open stretches of grass. The ranger remained at a respectful distance, crouched among the shadows of low shrubs, silent and observant, aware that the moment demanded both restraint and presence. The cub paused occasionally, sniffing the air, ears flicking at distant sounds of wind and bird call, and each time the lioness gently nudged it forward with her muzzle, a subtle but firm guidance. The ranger noticed how the cub now mirrored her mother's movements, tentative turns, careful steps, the slow yet steady adoption of natural rhythm. There was no urgency, no imposed pace, only a measured unfolding of independence under the watchful eyes of a parent. The lioness occasionally glanced back, meeting the ranger's presence with a calm acknowledgement, as if silently communicating that trust had been extended and respected, that the human's patience had found its place within this delicate chapter of life. The grass whispered beneath the cub's small paws, and the warm sunlight glinted off the golden fur of mother and child, each strand catching light like fine threads of amber. The ranger's breath was steady, his eyes tracing their movement, marveling at the quiet strength that had emerged from fragility, at the bond that had been nurtured without coercion, a connection built on observation, care, and gentle encouragement. The cub paused one final time near a small rise, glancing back with unsteady curiosity, and the ranger felt a quiet pang, a tender recognition that this was the culmination of everything that had come before. The lioness pressed close, nudging the cub forward once more, and together they moved toward the open expanse of the reserve, where taller grasses swayed and distant trees marked the edges of their wider world. Each step carried the cub further into independence, yet the presence of its mother remained constant, a living assurance that protection and guidance were still near. The ranger stayed low, absorbing the scene, heart quietly full, understanding that the rhythms of care and trust had reached their natural resolution. The trio disappeared gradually into the undulating landscape, mother and cub moving in tandem, the small figure now walking with deliberate confidence, chest lifted, ears alert. The ranger remained, a witness to the subtle beauty of release, of the natural cadence that defines life in the wild. The sun hung low, spilling warm light across the grass, and a gentle breeze stirred, carrying the distant rustle of movement through the reserve. For a moment the world held still, and in that hush there was wonder, quiet, unspoken, profound. The ranger exhaled softly, a smile barely touching his lips, and allowed himself to simply watch. Mother and cub vanished among the tall grasses, leaving only the echoes of careful steps and the enduring sense of trust, care, and letting go. The wind stirred again, soft and persistent, sweeping through the grass, carrying with it a final lingering sense of wonder.